Welcome classic rock fans to a video all about Led Zeppelin's pilferings, or appropriations if you want to gift wrap it. Led Zeppelin have been termed the greatest cover band in history, which is a little bit unfair really, because with cover bands you know exactly what you're getting, which is a facsimile of the original. But Led Zeppelin would often pass off other people's material as their own, not admitting any wrongdoing, until of course it was prized out of them in the law courts. It sounds like I'm down on this band, which is not the case. I do enjoy, in the words of the wonderful Jack Black, getting the lead out. But there's no doubt that this band have a bit of a shady reputation for, in the words of my 6-year-old daughter, being a bit of a cheaty pants. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant might argue that their music and these songs that operate within the paradigms of the blues are a bit like traditional arrangements, like oral tales passed round at a campfire. However, a lot of the material they appropriated has a lineage, and a lineage that goes right back to a clearly defined authorship. Now, many bands appropriate their influences, I'm not saying they don't, but with Led Zeppelin there was a tendency to fiddle about with an original till they kind of convinced themselves that it was their own composition. That's not to say Led Zeppelin didn't do blisteringly good versions of these songs, but to take other people's material and not give credit or royalties is a bit naughty. So in this video I'm going to think about Led Zeppelin's top 5 rip-offs, and stick around to the end for a few dishonourable mentions. Number 5 is Babe, I'm Going to Leave You, from their wonderful debut album. Now, this song had already been recorded by Joan Baez. She recorded it on her live album from 1962, simply called In Concert. Now, Baez lists this as a traditional tune. Traditional means in the public domain, so you don't have to pay any copyright or anything for it. However, the melody was not in the public domain. The melody was attributed to Anna Breeden from the 1950s. I have a bit of sympathy here with Led Zeppelin, as it seems like a genuine mistake. Maybe the blame lies with Joan Baez for not doing her research, or maybe employing a bit of folky skullduggery. Nevertheless, it went to court, and Anne Breeden eventually got her dues. Now you'll find that even the Joan Baez version and the Led Zeppelin version has a writing credit to Anne Breeden. In fact, on the newer versions of Led Zeppelin 1, you'll find a writing credit to Anne Breeden, Page and Plant, I believe. I don't know if you can read that, but Babe, I'm Going to Leave You to Breeden, Page and Plant. Number 4 is Dazed and Confused. Now this is where things start to get a bit ugly. This was actually a folk song written by Jake Holmes in 1967. Now the Yardbirds had recorded this, and the version that they recorded was very similar to the version that Led Zeppelin would later do. However, Led Zeppelin must have felt that their version was so far removed from the original composition as to be their track, so to speak, and therefore they didn't have to pay any royalties or give credit or anything sticky like that. However, Jake Holmes had different ideas, and in 2005 he sued, took them to court, and won the case. It was an out-of-court settlement. Things like this usually are out-of-court settlements, especially when you haven't got a Peter Grant to hang people out of hotel windows. For an undisclosed sum, I believe. Now, Dazed and Confused is actually credited to Page, inspired by Jake Holmes. Should be rumbled by Jake Holmes. Rumble on. There you are. I don't know if you can see that. Dazed and Confused, written by Page but inspired by Jake Holmes. Number 3 is Lemon's Song. Killing Floor by Howling Wolf is a wonderful, wonderful blues number, and Led Zeppelin quite rightly wanted to include it in their set. I think it's included in their set from about 1968 onwards. However, a familiar pattern begins to emerge as Zeppelin tinker around with it, adding some bells and whistles and dusting it off here so it can effectively masquerade as their own composition. It did diverge from the original lyrically, but style-wise, it's a little bit too similar. As I said, this band had a habit of appropriating the work of others and just changing it in an attempt to pass it off as their own. Number 2 is Bring It On Home. Now, Willie Dixon is a name that seems to be forever associated with this band. Zeppelin's 1969 track Bring It On Home was originally written by Willie Dixon in 1963. It was also performed by Sonny Boy Williams II, I believe a few years later. Here Led Zeppelin did a bit of cutting and pasting to this Dixon song. Led Dixon, so to speak. However, what we end up is a jiggering with the original. Led Zeppelin failed to disclose authorship or pay any royalties, and the publishers of the song, who was owned by Arch Music at this point, decided to sue. Again, they took Led Zeppelin to court, And the band settled out of court. Of course, I think it was an undisclosed settlement once more. The song is now credited solely to Dixon. Number 1 is A Whole Lot of Love. This is perhaps the most egregious case of Led Zeppelin's pilfery. The song was recorded by Howling Wolf in 1962 as You Need Love. However, it's Led Zeppelin were enamoured with the Small Faces version of You Need Love, and Robert Plant channels the vocal phrasing and timbre, everything of Steve Marriott's voice. They're virtually identical. Nevertheless, this song is still accredited to Willie Dixon, who wrote the number, and as you can guess, the usual scenario plays out. It's taken to court. Led Zeppelin again settle for an undisclosed amount. But what's telling here, of course, is Zeppelin's very laissez-faire attitudes to ownership and copyright, with Robert Plant admitting that he intentionally lifted the lyrics and vocal lines. That was it, a nick, he said. He went on to say that it was okay because these things don't really matter unless you're successful. He's got a point, I suppose, but I think taking people's work and passing it off as your own always matters. So there you are, that's my top 5 Led Zeppelin pilferings. And now, as I promised, a few dishonourable mentions. The first one has to be Led Zeppelin's Black Mountain Side. Now, the guitar part of this was unashamedly lifted from Bert Jansch. His song, of course, Blackwater Side. Jansch's record label did consider suing, but they felt that the song was already in the public domain. So they felt it was iffy whether or not they would actually succeed. But nevertheless, the guitar part is a blatant lift. And the second one I want to mention is perhaps the more famous one, as it was in all the music press recently. Of course, Spirit's song Taurus bears an uncanny resemblance to Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, or the opening sequence of it anyway. Now, Spirit says they toured with Led Zeppelin, I think in '69, so Zeppelin was certainly aware of their number. But the court found in favour of Led Zeppelin, saying you cannot copyright a chord sequence, even though it's arpeggiated in the same way. I think it's very, very fishy, if you ask me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to click like, subscribe and check that notification bell. I think I've already said that. Check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work than a classic album review. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is I hope you're well, staying safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.